To our Headlines Today special report. The CRPF is literally the backbone of Indian law and order, deployed to secure every election or to fight Naxals in the deep, inhospitable forest. Now it faces a major crisis. Young recruits are quitting en masse because of poor incentives and a disastrous man management policy. Jugal Purohit gets you the full story.
Among the world's largest paramilitary forces, the Central Reserve Force, a force tasked as India's lead counter-insurgency force, meant to take on internal security challenges of the nation, at least on paper. In reality, it's stretched in all directions, with all sorts of duties, from crowd control to VIP protection to law and order and election duties.
As if the ad hocism of performing a variety of duties wasn't enough, issues pertaining to stagnation in career progression, lack of financial incentives and an improper man management policy has begun eroding this fine force, forcing many officers to even seek judicial intervention.
The CRPF Academy in Gurgaon has seen the highest number of under-training officers leave the force midway this year. What's worrying is that the number has never been so high. Stories like that of Arvind Unial, former assistant commandant in the CRPF, who left the force in 2012, stand testimony to all that seems to have gone wrong with the force. Having joined the uniform for the love of the work the force did, Arvind, who has served in the most hot sectors, had no option but to move on.
If there are no vacancies for promotions, then an officer should not be deprived of financially. At least he has to be given financial upgradations.
Those leaving the force aren't doing so only from the stage of training. The number of those resigning the force mid-service and seeking voluntary retirement is also spiking. DC Day, a CRPF cadre officer, was the first in the force to rise to the rank of the ADG, too believes that it's high time the system understands its people better.
They should put together some system that at least a man can expect that if I have joined, I should go up to the level of a flag officer, that is DIGs, IGs.
However, if those on the top are to be believed, there's hardly any issue worth bothering about.
The percentage-wise, the people leaving is not much more, is not increasing. It's at a, I would call it at a healthy level, which is not really affecting our operational capability in any way.
Nobody is pressing the panic button as yet. The top brass of the CRPF, manned largely by officers on deputation from the Indian Police Service, is trying to address some of these issues by shaping up newer policies. But many still remain unsure, arguing that the treatment has to be deep-rooted and not cosmetic if this force has to regain its rightful place. With Prabir Biswas, Jugal Purohit in New Delhi for Headlines Today.
In fact, with us in the studio is someone who's seen the working of the CRPF at very close quarters, Mr. Sipal Singh. He's a former IG of the force. Also joining us is Jugal Purohit, our correspondent who brought us that story. Jugal, I want to ask you first. You said about policies that the top brass of the CRPF is now mulling. Exactly what are these policies? Because the attrition rate is at an all-time high. They don't have too much time.
Absolutely, Padmaja, and my fear is that these policies which I had mentioned about, according to the feedback that one has got from the ground, may not be enough. These policies are now that are now being spoken about relate to transfer policies, policies of placing the group centers close to where the battalion is posted, towards ensuring that the supplies are smooth. But the fact remains that a lot of officers of the CRPF who I have spoken to in the course of preparing for this report have told me that these things do not address their concerns. In fact, what they are essentially looking at, and as Arvind Unial's case brought out, was a very deep-rooted treatment which this force needed, because on one day it's conducting elections, on the other day it's fighting terrorists, on the third day it's aiding a Delhi police team to help law and order duties. So given how varied this force has become in its role, a lot of officers, professionals are losing faith in what they're doing, and they believe that they do not get a chance to actually do what they are supposed to do and what they joined the force for. Remember, in 2001, after the Kargil war, a group of ministers had actually, given the CRPF the tag of country's lead counter-insurgency force. And obviously, the lead counter-insurgency force being treated in this manner and fashion will not be acceptable to a lot of officers who are joining in.
Mr. Singh, when you were commanding the CRPF, were there any of these problems that you had highlighted, that you brought to the notice of the top brass and to the government, and was anything done about it?
I must tell you that I was one of those people who won the top brass because of IGP, after that the DGP, or additional DGP, at that time it was DGP. So all these things did come to our notice. For example, there were cases of suicide due to depression. What type of depression? Because long hours of duty. One is not able to get leave, for example, long hours duty and leave. He wants leave for his cremation of his father, but we give a leave when everything is over. We are not able to give leave. Then there are cases where the person is given very long hours. Instead of 8 hours, he is given 16 hours duty because of lack of strength. So night sleep is not there. With the result, what was happening was that a sort of depression was setting in. We did conduct a study at that time also. And that study indicated clearly that there is need of relaxation as far as their duties are concerned. Unfortunately, the law and order situation in this country is such that whatever we may do, we added some battalions to give them some relaxation. We added some companies to give them training companies so the people can go over for training and rotational training and come back. But every time you added the strength, the full strength gets committed. Because the law and order situation becomes everywhere, law and order is blowing up. Everywhere you have this thing, that thing, with the result that this force is stretched to the maximum. And having been stretched to the maximum, there is a always tendency for the senior officers to ask them to deploy. So unfortunately, the deployment rate and the stretching of duty hours, night duties, and top of it, thrown into alien lands. You know, today you are in Punjab. After 3 days, you are in the next state affected area. After 4 days, you will be in Bengal. After 6 days, you are in insurgency in Northeast. With the result, the person is not able to orient himself, and immediately he is transferred.
But Mr. Singh, a lot of these problems can be put down to the shortage of manpower, like you just mentioned. Isn't the other aspect also that the basic facilities that the forces deserve are not given to them? And that is why we see a lot of our CRPF men are practically sitting ducks. Acclimatization is not done properly. They are not given the kind of gear and equipment that they should, considering the conditions that they serve in. And these are not even concerns that are given attention to by the government in power.
I think you're true to an extent. I will not say that they are not given at all. True to an extent that yes, they lack certain facilities. For example, housing facilities. Now, how do the government has been trying its best, let me tell you.
What have they done over the years?
Supposing we want to create a housing complex. Let us say I create a housing complex somewhere near Chhattisgarh. Tomorrow, all this strength may not be there at Chhattisgarh. With the way the houses are lying vacant. So therefore, every time we thought of a focal point. The focal point was the group center. All right, this is a group center. From this group center, there are 4 battalions. They will radiate to this area and be deployed there. The group center, we are giving them accommodation. But unfortunately, when you have a group center of 4 battalions or a group center of 5 battalions, the requirement in that area will be 20 battalions. So you force the battalion from there to come there. So there is no housing facility, A.
Okay.
Then medical facilities. No, group center have got medical hospital they have got to look after them, their families can stay. But in the battalion, there's only 1 doctor or 2 doctors posted in the battalion. That doctor will prescribe some medicine. Either they get from group center or they have to purchase from their own. Ultimately, reimbursement may take years or months. So the reimbursement doesn't take place. With the result, they're putting the money from their pocket. Again, there's a stress for a poor man. So there are a lot of other things which I think can be answered to a great extent if we are able to reduce the duties and confine them. We have done all permutation. For last, I was number of years in this organization, 20 years or so. I know all permutation combination. I was said, all right, we have Jammu Soman Battalion, there is that created in Jammu Group Center. We have so many, but every time it went haywire.
Okay, Jugal, I want to bring you in for the final question. Now, the force is getting increasingly young. You've got the young men who are joining the CRPF. They come with a different set of aspirations and expectations altogether. While the working environment cannot be helped, it really comes with the job. is there any plan afoot to try and incentivize these people who want to be a part of the force?
I think
Padmaja, to answer your question, as far as incentivization is concerned, I think our viewers need to be told that all the officers of the CRPF and BSF and other paramilitary forces, they've actually, knocked on the doors of the High Court seeking these incentives to be given to them. So that is the state of the morale. They have actually had to, seek judicial intervention to get their financial incentives, and obviously then it does not remain an incentive any longer. And Padmaja, there's one more thing I would just like to bring in here, that at a time when the CRPF is rapidly expanding, the options before the top brass and the government are very clear. Either let the CRPF expand in the manner in which it is doing, that is conducting counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency, election, law and order, everything. But then you have a dedicated set of people doing that dedicated job, and not one person or one set of people doing all sorts of jobs. And they will actually have to now compartmentalize and ensure that their entire stream of work is streamlined, so that people like Arvind Unyal, who was an extremely bright officer, do not get disillusioned and leave the force midway, because after all we are talking about the world's largest paramilitary force at 3 lakh plus. CRPF is world's largest paramilitary force. It's the backbone of India's internal security, as well as the lead counter-insurgency force. So that's the question before the government now, is to actually restructure this force, give it the incentives that it is fighting in the High Court and other courts for, because it's a really pitiable situation where the officers have to fight against the government they are out there to protect. And also, Padmaja, one last point is that, now it's the time that unless CRPF officers are given the right way, right direction, this exodus will only continue, will only intensify, and obviously the ramification and the cost of it will have to be borne by the nation.
Absolutely. Imagine these are people who've given up the prospect of a cushy job sitting in some metro city to actually go out there in the jungles and fight in situations which you can't even begin to imagine sitting in front of your televisions. Doesn't the government at least owe these people to at least incentivize their jobs? Thank you very much, Mr. Sipal Singh, for joining us with your expert opinion. Also, my colleague Jugal Purohit for getting us that very important report.